So we're going to work on this problem visually. We're going to come up with a visual solution. So it's a word problem. It's a challenging problem. So the first thing is we have to read the problem very carefully. If Ivan gives Ben 3/5 of his money, so I want to make sure Ivan's money can be split into fifths. So I chose 5 equal parts to represent Ivan's money. 5 coming from this denominator, 5. Now I can easily find out 3/5. So 3 of these parts will go to Ben. And then what happens? Ben is supposed to have 2 times of what Ivan is left with. If Ivan gives Ben 3/5 of his money, he will be left with only 2 parts. And after Ben receives 3 of the pieces from Ivan, Ben is supposed to have 4 identical pieces. And that tells me originally Ben had only 1 such piece. So what Ben has was just one of these. Ben must have had originally just 1/5 of what Ivan had. And yes, you have to read the first sentence of the problem and decide if you assign Ivan 5 identical pieces, if Ivan's money, if you choose to represent Ivan's money with 5 identical pieces, you need to represent Ben's money with only 1 piece. Only then this statement will be valid. Or at least that's one of the ways you can make this statement valid. So now I have assigned 1 chunk for Ben and 5 identical chunks for Ivan based on the first sentence of our problem. Now what happens? In the second scenario, let me underline it. In the second scenario, Ben gives Ivan 1/3 of his money. And then Ivan ends up having $140 more than what Ben would have been. The issue is I cannot find 1/3 of Ben's money very conveniently. However, I can do one thing. I can cut Ben's amount into 3 equal parts like so. And then give 1 piece to Ivan and see what happens. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. So since I cut Ben's piece into 3 equal parts, I'm better off cutting each of Ivan's 5 pieces also into 3 equal parts. Then I can compare the 2 amounts in a fairly convenient manner. So why did I choose to cut Ben's amount into 3 equal parts? Because of 1/3. All right. Then what happens? Let's take a look at what happens next. So here I have transferred 1/3 of Ben's amount to Ivan. Now the question is, Ivan has how many pieces altogether? Originally Ivan's money was split into 5 equal parts. Now the total amount that Ivan has is split into 3 times 5, 15 plus 1, 16. So if you count the little squares, you're going to get 16 here. And if you count the total number of squares Ben is left with, you're going to get 2. Now what happens? We are claiming, or the question claims, that Ivan will have $140 more than what Ben would have then. So what's the difference between the number of squares Ivan has now and the number of squares Ben has now? The difference is 14. Ivan has 14 additional squares compared to Ben. Once again, If you count the total number of squares Ivan has, he has 16, Ben has 2, 16 minus 2 is 14. So Ivan has 14 additional squares. So the 14 additional squares must represent $140. And that tells me each square represents 140 divided by 14, or $10. Each square represents 140 divided by 14 is equal to $10. Now almost finished. So the question says, how much money do the two boys have altogether? Well, altogether the two boys have 18 squares, 16 plus 2. So take your 18 squares and multiply it by 10, and you're going to get $180. So the two boys altogether have $180. That's my answer.